Good morning. I'm here with Phil Camparelli from JP Morgan Asset Management. Phil is a managing director and has been with the firm for over 20 years. Uh, and before that, he got his BS and MBA from Fordham University. Good morning.
Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
Good, thanks. It's nice to see you. Um,
Nice to.
could you take a couple of seconds to tell us what is it you do? What's a managing director do?
Sure. So, Chuck, as you said, I've been with JP Morgan for this is my 21st year. I spent 11 years in fixed income. So, once a bond person, always a bond person. And my job is to really scour the world for the best opportunities in multi-asset. So what does that mean? It means that you could buy equities, you could buy bonds, and you could be in the US, you could be outside of the US. So it's our job to really figure out what are the best opportunities for growth while also managing all the downside risk that investors are worried about.
Very good. Speaking of downside risk, what kept you up last year? What kept you up at night?
That's a good question, Chuck. So last year, you go back in your career and there are years that, I wonder what happened in 2014 or 2015. None of us are ever going to forget 2020, Chuck, for a number of reasons. And one of the things that kept us up at night happened really early on, Chuck, in the pandemic. It was the week of March 16th, when the only thing that was working in the portfolio was cash. You weren't getting any protection from fixed income. If you tried to get government bonds into your portfolio or treasuries or safe haven assets, you couldn't find them. There was no liquidity. And really, Chuck, the thing that kept us up most was that credit. So credit are things like high yield or investment grade corporate bonds. They were going down as much as equities. And that really should never happen. There should always be a diversification benefit. So that was a really frightening time at markets. And Chuck, honestly, more frightening than what we all went through in late 2008 and 2009. Because if diversification isn't working, it doesn't matter if it's 1920 or 2020, your financial system, your capital markets deteriorate very, very quickly. And that's why the Federal Reserve and Jay Powell had to step in so creatively and effectively in late March and early April.
Mm-hmm. And do you think the Federal Reserve that was a huge had a huge impact on that?
I do, Chuck. So they did a lot of things. They took interest rates to zero, the federal funds rate to zero. They did a lot of quantitative easing, but that wasn't enough, Chuck. What really stemmed the tide was on 8 o'clock in the morning on March 23rd, when the Federal Reserve said that they would buy corporate bonds. They never did that in 2008 and 2009. This was a forced lockdown, a forced recession. It was nobody's fault. No industry to blame this time around. So they had the political air cover to be able to come in and actually buy private sector bonds, both on the investment grade side as well as the high yield side, Chuck. I never thought I'd see that in my career. The Federal Reserve actually buying high yield bonds, and they ended up doing that. They announced that the Thursday before Easter last year. I remember these days like it were yesterday because it was just so effective. And that's really what stemmed the tide. And not only did they do it for existing bonds that are out there, Chuck, which is called the secondary market, but what was really important was that they said that they would buy bonds in what's called the primary market, or new issuance. Mm-hmm. So if a company was having a really hard time, like Live Nation, we all love concerts. Who knows when the next concert is going to be? But Live Nation was able to come to market, and they knew that the Federal Reserve would be a buyer of last resort. And that's really what, as I said, turned this whole thing around. On March 23rd is when equities stopped falling and when volatility stopped rising. And then we just have been on kind of a one-way train since then.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, assuming that we get and keep COVID under control, what are your expectations for 2021?
Yeah, so 2021, Chuck, is going to be like a big family reunion for human interaction, and I can't wait for it. And I think it's going to line up pretty well with kind of late spring and summer when people are already happy, right? I mean, we know how dark and dreary the winter can be when there's no pandemic. But I think 2021 is going to be really exciting. And the investment implications of that is something that we call pro-cyclical. All pro-cyclical means is that we believe growth in 2021 is going to be better than it was in 2020. And the two asset classes that we like most in that environment are what's called small cap US equity, so smaller companies that do well as the US recovers, and emerging markets equity. Emerging markets equity tend to do well in a global recovery. And as we know, Chuck, this wasn't just a US event, this was a global pandemic, and we believe the world is going to emerge from this. So emerging markets looks pretty good in that environment as well. And we believe that the vaccines are truly a game changer. You know, that November 9th announcement from Pfizer, and then the week later from Moderna, Johnson & Johnson coming online, that's truly a game changer for us. And that's what changed all of our views into this pro-cyclicality, which has really worked since that day.
Super. Well, thank you. I appreciate
Sure.
the time. Yeah, thanks again.
Yeah, good luck. Good luck the rest of this year, and I wish we can do this in person. Hopefully, at some point soon.
Thanks, Bill. Have a great day.
You too. Bye.